Hey folks, thanks for joining me for this episode from the Embellish Pod. If you got here by chance, please take a moment to hit the subscribe button. Hopefully I can be found on any podcasting platform that exists, and if you can't find me on a platform, send me an email at embellishpod@gmail.com and I'll try to get that taken care of. You can also find video versions of this podcast on YouTube. You can find all of my links on Instagram at embellishpod or TikTok with the same handle. I have a website. It is www.embellishpod.com. It's a place to pick up these links, episode details, and more. Today, we're going to have a conversation about the Kentucky Bourbon Festival. If you have paid attention for the last handful of years, I have been an attendee at the Kentucky Bourbon Festival. In the last couple of years, I've actually been able to attend on a media pass. I did go in 21 and 22 on my own dime, one as a general admission attendee, and then the second one I did as a VIP attendee. And I wanted to kind of make sure that I had some skin in the game when it came to talking about what might be the premier bourbon festival in the state of Kentucky year in and year out. If you look at it from a size and prestige factor, it probably is that. And luckily, my coverage and the growth of this particular podcast led me to a place where I was able to start attending as a media personality. And media personalities get some sort of a different type of access, right? So the first year we got access in with the VIPs and we're actually able to kind of mingle around with them. The second year that I came as a media person, we got our own separate media tent. And then since then, it's just been kind of growing out on what that expectation is. And there's been a myriad of types of characters that have been a part of the media coverage of the Kentucky Bourbon Festival. Now, I've sat on this episode for quite some time for a couple of reasons. First, I wanted to see what other creators were going to do with their feedback about the event. I'm always curious of what other folks have to say. I know what I thought of the event, and I know what was being said throughout the course of the event. And no event is perfect, without a doubt. But I think I have to start with the phrase of saying, stop chasing bottles and start tasting bourbon. Almost every piece of content that has been generated has mentioned a number of problems with the Kentucky Bourbon Festival, and a lot of them have to do with lines and bottle access and a whole bunch of stuff. But I've been around for a little while, and I feel very comfortable talking about this because I have done a festival review every year since it's been in the format that it's in, right? And I think that a lot of some of the new personalities that are showing up for this view 2025 in a fundamentally incorrect way. There is a misunderstanding by a significant portion of the attendees as well. This event has not necessarily been positioned as a bottle hunting event. It is an access event. You're paying for unprecedented opportunities to taste over 200 expressions from 65 distilleries. You meet master distillers, you discover craft producers that you potentially never find otherwise. And it's an experience of bourbon culture at its peak, right? The fact that some bottles happen to be available for purchase is incidental, or at least it should be when you're trying to view what this event is. If bottle sales are creating this level of operational chaos and attendee frustration, maybe my hot take is stop selling bottles altogether and force people to remember what this festival is actually for. It's for drinking bourbon, not hoarding it. It's for communing with other people that think similar things and that like similar things. It's for learning about brands. It's for a whole lot of things. And if you get access to a bottle here and there, it is what it is. Now, with that out of the way, this really isn't, I don't think, Kentucky Bourbon Festival's problem. I think it's more of a problem in bourbon culture. Maybe the only thing that I would say to Kentucky Bourbon Festival is clearly differentiate what the purpose of the festival is. So as attendees think about showing up, they have a better understanding of what they're after, right? But my feedback, my take on this is really about, this is the problem with bourbon culture, right? Bottle hunting videos are what move the needle for social media people like me. Now, you've seen all of the bottle hunting videos that I've done, and they have incredible popularity. A little tongue-in-cheek there, but podcasters like myself, and I have some friends that do the same things, and some long-form creators that maybe write articles or maintain blogs or books or all of these things. We take the time to talk with distillery representatives and have a genuine concern for the state of affairs within the bourbon community. But when you look at some of the largest social media influencers, whether it be through short form content like TikTok or Instagram or Reels, or even YouTube Shorts, or even just generically YouTube, the largest social media presences have some of the easier to produce contents. It's reviews, it's talking about, particular bottles, access events. It's a lot of really, really easy kind of turn and burn type content as opposed to what we're doing with this. Now, that's just a podcaster complaint, right? That's kind of, we spend a lot of time with very little return. But you've got some titans out there that are doing it and doing it well. You think about Bourbon Pursuit, those guys obviously have the market effectively cornered in podcasting to that type of content. But the reality is that a lot of the influencers that covered the event are trying to make the most sticky content that they can that may not paint an accurate description of what the event is about and what it's for. So I think it's a good idea, at least for the people that listen to this, to frame this a little bit differently, right? Go follow those guys, go listen to what they have to say. It's all fine. But also there's a group of smaller holders that have important voices for you to kind of understand this. So let's frame this out maybe a little bit. This is what dominated the festival for thousands of other attendees. You can pay up to, $600+ for VIP tickets. You wake up super early in the morning and line up outside the gates. All of these things are flawed approaches for me, right? I've done this for a while. I very rarely make it to the gates at opening time, but you get there at 5 a.m. with an intent to get in at 11 a.m. because you've paid for your VIP ticket. And then, from what I understand, because I wasn't there for this, some people sprinted, like full ran across a grass field to go get a bottle of poison. Now, don't get me wrong, it is delicious poison, but we're adults trying to chase down trophies, and they weren't running towards what might be a rare bourbon tasting. They weren't rushing to meet the tent that was housing Jackson Purchase Distillery, which is Craig Beam's first bourbon release from a small budding brand, but the last name Beam carries some notoriety. They were running to stand in line for 3 hours to buy a bottle, and that bottle is going to have 24 ounces, just like every other bottle has 24 ounces. And once those 24 ounces are gone, it's gone, right? This isn't about having an experience that you remember for a long time with a group of like-minded people. It's about having a trophy to take home and show to your friends that will be forgotten with the next year's limited release, right? It's trophy hunting at its best. It's going to hunt behind high fences, right? You're paying for a high fence hunt, and then you're getting upset whenever you didn't get the trophy deer that you handpicked off of the menu on the website when it came down to it. Now, what those line standers missed, put this in mind, right? For everybody who stood in a line to buy a bottle, good for you. It is a way that you could experience this event. But there were 200+ different bourbon expressions available. If you were to go into a bar and try to drink through even 10, you're probably going to spend what you spent on your ticket. And there's still 190 more to go. There is also an opportunity to converse with and to get to know craft distilleries that you've likely never heard of. The Casey Joneses of the world for the people that are not in the state of Kentucky. The Jackson Purchase Distillery, the West Kentucky Distilling, the Silk Velvet, the Potter Jane of all places, right? So all of these places that you're not going to necessarily have access to, you have access to, but you decide, hey, I'm going to go stand in line because I need the next Heaven Hill LE. I need to be able to have all of these things. Now, there's some people that have that in mind and they've got ulterior motives, and we'll get back to that, but there were master distillers like Dan Calloway explaining Bardstown Bourbon Company's first ever double-barreled Hungarian oak, the entire point of the festival. So, like I said, Kentucky Bourbon Festival, I don't think necessarily has an operational problem. It's going to become a problem they're going to have to solve, but there's an identity crisis amongst attendees who fundamentally misunderstand what they're paying for, and maybe, just maybe, the solution is don't sell bottles or don't sell LE bottles. Now, that takes a fundamental reset in people's mindsets. So let's back up to the general admission attendee, right? Because general admission attendees are already at a disadvantage because your VIPs have access to the grounds at 11 a.m. and general attendees get in at noon. And that is if you are at the front of the line, which, like I said before, you may have to get in line at 5 a.m. to get in early because people are trying to hunt allocated bottles. If you spend $190 to get in, you're going to get access to 65 plus distilleries, 200 bourbon expressions, craft distilleries, master distillers, educational experiences, and a community of people that largely enjoy the same things that you enjoy. Conversations about whiskey, conversations about life, conversations about whatever, right? It's tough to replicate that kind of an experience and do it with 7,000 other people. And I'll say this, is that if we have 7,000 plus other people, and if you've been to the fairgrounds, they're relatively small. If not, go look at anybody's complaining video and they'll show you a map of the festival grounds, but it's not a big place. To be able to have 7,000 people in there and be able to get through lines tasting effectively tells me that line management is doing okay. It's really a mindset in the attendees that changed, that created some significant lines for other things, right? There is an access pattern to things that you're literally incapable of purchasing, right? So Potter Jane was handing out some new make. You can't buy that. That's not going to be available for years. And I got an opportunity to talk to them and then subsequently be able to interview them. I got a chance to talk with the folks at Angels Envy and subsequently interview them. But as a just average attendee, you have access to the people in the same way that I do. You have the ability to talk to them about what they're doing, what their passion is, and why they do this, because there are industries that they could go and work in and make more money than what they're currently doing, but they really like it. And I think about dark arts, right? So I've had Macaulay on a couple of years ago at this point talking about what he was going to do with dark arts, but they've got a release of 16-year buff turkey, which everyone has talked about ad nauseum. It's a phenomenal pour. You're probably not going to be able to buy that bottle unless you happen to be one of the lucky few, but they were pouring it, right? And so if they took, 10 bottles or 5 bottles and set them, let's just say it's 5 bottles, and they set them off to the side and they do 24 1-ounce pours, which are actually pouring less than 1 ounce most of the time, but 24 1-ounce pours across 5 bottles, you're looking at 100 and some odd people that have access to the taste of it, the ability to taste something that is kind of a whole item, right? There's not going to be any more of it. Would you rather stand in line for 3 hours for a chance to buy one bottle that you might not be able to get, or stand in line for 20 minutes to be able to at least get a taste of it, be able to talk to the person who selected it, who blended it, and who created what kind of came out the other side? It's a little ridiculous. Now, I've said a number of times, maybe the key is removing the ability to purchase bottles. And I want to come back to that kind of later on. I think maybe it's an LE conversation, right? And so, the very old St. Nick that is $1,000 bottle that was being poured on site, right? That's just a part of your admission ticket. The first access to Craig Beam's distillate, the first access to a handful of other distillers that are there. Some surprising places like Wenzel that caught a lot of people off guard. Casey Jones having the things they're doing, Potter Jane doing what they're doing, Jep the Creed having stuff out. Like, you can just take just the craft section and have a phenomenal time. You just have to kind of change your mindset and eliminate some of your FOMO, right? Because that's what really drives this, is that everybody wants to have what some person told them that they should have access to, right? The most important limited edition thing that's out there. There's a little bit of irony in this. I'm drinking out of a Walt Disney mug and talking about lines, but I know it's a significant aside, but maybe that's the point, right? This is how my family and I, we like to go to Disney. We go about once a year, and we treat it like this. Maybe this is what you should do with the Kentucky Bourbon Festival as an attendee, because I'm going to say I think the value is still there, even at general attendance, right? General admission at a couple $100 for a few days of unrestricted access to distillers, tints, and pours is absolutely worth it. It is a deal that you cannot replicate anywhere else. Not that I know of. But you start the event, you've got Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Pick one thing a day that is a must-do thing, right? Whether it's stand in line for a bottle or it's go taste XYZ thing, right? You set those aside and those become your must-do items. You go do that thing, and then for the other 4 or 5 hours of the day, go taste what's available. Go step into a tent of someone that you've never seen before or never tried before but have seen out in the marketplace. Expand your palette beyond the things that you already. We've all had a shit ton of Heaven Hill or Maker's Mark or Jim Beam or any insert heritage distillery here. We've all had just a metric fuck ton of it. Why are you standing in line for 3 hours for this? Why? What is so important that you have to have that? Is it so you can then show someone else that you have it? Cool. Great. Then when the bottle's gone, now what? You're going to have to chase it again. You're like a fucking drug addict. Sorry, I'm gonna kill the rant there. Going back to the intent of the festival, it wasn't created as a bottle hunting competition. Hell, the first couple of years, you could not buy bottles at the event. It was about creating an immersive bourbon experience for people who wanted to learn, to taste, explore, not just acquire. And somewhere between 2021 and 2025, this became Whiskey Black Friday or High Fence Hunting or whatever it is that you want to call it. It is what it is. What most people will also say in their review videos is that sampling lines were relatively short. And I did note that, right? Last year and the year before, sometimes the sampling lines would get out of hand, and that was because somebody would generate a buzz about XYZ tent, and then everyone would flock to that tent, and I think people became a little more reasonable, or maybe it's because all of the assholes that would stand in line and kind of make things worse instead of moving on to another tent were all standing in line to buy bottles, so maybe that's a win for the rest of us, but the biggest complaints are about the chaotic lines to purchase bottles. Maybe, like I said, I want to go backwards. I want to talk about this now. Maybe the answer is only general releases, right? Because the festival can be a lifeline for craft distillers. And I think about Larrikin, formerly Lawrenceburg Bourbon Company. If I remember correctly, reading over some of the interviews that they've done in the past, the first year they attended the Bourbon Festival was the thing that kept them alive that year, the thing that allowed them to turn into a profitable situation. And they had some single barrels that were picked, which is a great thing to have there, but they also had some standard offerings, and they also had access to thousands of people that they might not have otherwise gotten, right? This is a fantastic opportunity for them as well. But the problem with having LEs be kind of the name of the game is that if you're a small distiller and you have an LE that you release at the festival, a couple hundred people are going to get it. And after those couple hundred people are going to get it, there's going to be a couple hundred people to 1,000 people that aren't going to get it, and they're going to piss and moan about it. And when they piss and moan about it, they're going to complain about the layer content. And so it's kind of it's like this snowball that creates an avalanche that creates some negative publicity for them. So it may benefit them to say, we can do single barrels. That's fine. But we can also do just standard releases. Just do standard releases, right? If somebody wants to do an LE release, they're going to have to find a new and unique way to do it and make it not there. And I think the only line that I stood in to buy a bottle was towards the end of the event because I wanted to get one of the Beam bowling pin bottles because I love the idea that the decanters are coming back. And I would have loved to have seen Green River put out their ceramic decanters because that would have been phenomenal. And maybe it was there and I missed it because I was busy drinking other things. What I also love is that cocktail culture is growing inside of that. And so it opens up the audience of the event. There's a number of tents that had some phenomenal cocktails generated that people could have. You know, the slushy still reigns supreme for a whole lot of folks, but the ability to be able to consume bourbon in a number of different ways is great for the market segment, right? It is more people that can attend the event, more unique perspectives, more ways to make this thing as diverse and fun as it possibly can be. Something that lends a little bit of credence to saying, hey, let's get rid of LE sales at the festival. There are some reports, unsubstantiated from my perspective, but there are some reports of folks darting in there as a VIP, picking up a number of LE bottles, and then going out to the parking lot and reselling them to someone else who's walking into the event, which is a terrible place to be, right? Because number one, it's diluting the value of the event. Number two, there is no guarantee on the authenticity of whatever it is that you just purchased. And number three, it's illegal. So I'm going to challenge attendees of the event, if you're going to go to the Kentucky Bourbon Festival and somebody in a parking lot walks up to you and says, hey, do you want to buy this bottle? You probably shouldn't, right? Are you the person that would easily get invited into a stranger's van with candy? This is the same thing. Who knows what's in that bottle? Who knows what's actually going to be the thing that you consume when you pop the top on that? And you're feeding the fire of the problem. Is there's this situation where we have illicit trade happening. And what does that have to do with the festival managers? Nothing. They can't do a whole lot about that. They can't invite police on premise, but I don't think any of y'all want more police presence aside from what is necessary to keep everybody safe. Do you want to have to validate that when you get into your car, the receipt and the bag of what you've bought is what you purchased? No, right? So let's all like be reasonable ass adults and not participate in that kind of fuckery, because that's going to be a road that's going to lead to significant more restriction and significant more pain whenever it comes to the event. The things that make this event successful is access and community, right? So the other thing that even in the complaining videos, and no shade to the guys who are creating complaining videos, you have your opinion and that is perfectly fine, right? You showed up because you wanted to be at a bottle hunting event and get access to bottles. Cool. That's not what this event is supposed to be for, but that's cool. That's what you heard it was. That's what you came here for. Maybe you know better next year, and if you don't show up next year, dope. There's more space for the rest of us that just want to have a good time. But even those folks would say that they had great time hanging out with community, right? Hanging out at houses, hanging out, during the festival event of itself. But if you want to have fun, I lucked out this year, and I had an opportunity to stay with a group of people that I met through the internet, which if you'd have told us that 20 years ago, our parents would cringe because they'd be like, hey, you're not supposed to meet strangers from the internet. But some of them were strangers and some of them were people that I already knew. And so we had a house nearby and we had meals and we had our own little samplings at the end of the night, and we went out and had dinner together and we attended some events together. It became a community event, which is much, much closer to what the purpose of an event like this is that there's access, but then there's this other layer of hanging out with people, getting to know people. Bourbon is a communal spirit. If you've ever listened to an episode that I've ever done, it's a given, right? That it's a communal spirit. It's a thing that allows for sharing. It's a thing that is part of sharing. And it brings people together often that would not be hanging out together in any other way, especially geographically, because if we look at the house that I stayed in, there was some people from central Indiana, there were people from central Kentucky, there were people from western Kentucky, myself, there were some folks from Ohio, right? And even one from South Carolina, even though it is gross ass Myrtle Beach. But how else do you put those people in the same house at the same time unless they knew each other from somewhere else? I've got a group of friends that I call the Brain Trust, and we all met through whiskey, and now we're geographically dispersed, but we go to events together, right? That's the thing that wins here. Going alone, you can still have a good time because you're going to find people at the event that have similar mindsets and similar tastes or whatever, but there's a whole portion of the day that you're not at the event because you're only at the Bourbon Festival potentially from 11 a.m. till 6 p.m. Right? So what do you do after that? And then the other part of it that can be fun, right? Most of the distilleries in the area are having off-site events throughout that time. Some of them are dinners, some of them are pop-ups. If you're visiting the tents, this is the thing. This is the thing. If you're not standing in line for bottles and you're visiting the tents, talking to distilleries, you'll learn about a potential Milam and Green pop-up that might have happened, or a whiskey house pop-up that might have happened, or any number of events that are happening in and around Bardstown that are interesting to you. I promise they're interesting to you. But you don't learn that standing in line complaining with your friends about how long this damn line is, right? Get out of line. Go do something fun. There's a bunch of educational content, right? There are sessions running every, 30 minutes to an hour up on the stage where their different industry people are talking about stuff. The tents are doing things often. I think about the Pursuit guys. They have their own sort of educational thing that they were kind of putting together. Each one of the distilleries often are having little sessions where their master distillers there or their head of blending is there or whatever, right? There's a plethora of things to do. If you can't find the value for what you spent to get in, it's probably because you attended with the wrong expectations. Now, that's the big thing. The reason why I'm recording this video is that, if you're going to bottle hunt, you're going to have a bad time, and that's okay. I want to provide some context for anyone who might be interested in going, that all they've heard is the downside of standing in line for bottles. If you don't go with that in mind, if you go with that as kind of an added bonus where I might have the chance to buy a thing that I tasted, you're going to still have a hell of a time, right? If you're going to spend the money for VIP, you're going to get in an hour, which means you're probably going to get access to some pours or some bottles earlier than everyone else. But the reality is you're also going to have a whole separate section that's going to have its own food that you don't have to pay for. And then they're going to have distiller or brand events that are specific for just VIP. And you're going to get access to a different little bag full of treats and goodies and things that you have access to. Like, there is a separate section, right? It is elitism at its best, and it is a value, I think, where you have a separate section. There may be even some private bathrooms that are air conditioned in comparison to the porta-johns that everyone else is sharing, right? There's a number of things that are there. It's not necessarily about access to bottles. And I know I am beating this poor dead horse to death a second, third, fourth, fifth time, whatever, right? I think we're going to wrap up at this point, right? And it may take me a while to wrap up because I'm still kind of thinking about all of this, but maybe the knee-jerk reaction is Kentucky Bourbon Festival eliminates all on-site sales of limited releases. And I don't mean single barrels that are selected for the event or, single barrels in general. I just mean, the Heaven Hill or the Knob Creek 21 year, whatever that is. Just kind of get rid of those, right? LEs, you guys can figure something else separately for that. But let's make it about visiting booths and then picking up bottles of things that you actually try while you're there, if possible. Craft distilleries need that direct-to-consumer revenue access. They need those community participation opportunities because the market is constricting a little, and so they need to be able to stay alive as much as possible. It has been a literal lifesaver for a number of craft distilleries. The other part is social media people. You have a responsibility, right? We were all, a lot of us, were given access to this event for free, something that is not inexpensive. We were given access to a tent that gave us access to some food for free, right? There are things that this festival has done for us, and we have a due diligence to report the truth. So bottle lines are long, well covered. Let's put a pin in it. What else about that event might have been good? Right? There is a plethora of opportunity for you to have covered this. And there are a lot of short-form content creators that absolutely did that, right? While they were at the event, they stopped and talked to distilleries and they talked to distillers and to event attendees and covered a lot of that information. But the bigger accounts, which you're subject to the algorithm, I get that, right? And if you don't make the right video, it's going to tank and then it's going to impact the next video and it's going to impact... I get it. We have plenty of bottle haul videos out there. Who cares? Right? You got your bottles, and in 6 months, nobody's going to give a shit about those bottles. Stop making the how to get allocated bottles at Kentucky Bourbon Festival strategy guides. Maybe a VIP versus GA general admission comparison. Great video. Absolutely great video. Someone should be talking about that. Maybe there's a more in-depth sort of expose conversation on the flippers that are happening out in the parking lot or even within the festival, because the festival does not condone those types of situations. Maybe talk about transportation, right? Because parking is a nightmare. Hotels book up super, super fast, right? Let's talk about the things that the community could get right to help out with the festival, right? There are almost no really deep dives on craft distilleries or the craft distillery area when you look at the broader context of content that has been created. There's podcasts like myself and like Bourbon Lens and like a whole bunch of others that will now continue to do episodes based off of that, and the festival was a vital contact point for us to be able to have that, and so that will pay that out. But everyone else, kind of get on board. Let's talk about this because this is a segment we all love. We want to see it continue to exist. So it's going to be something more than just supporting the heritage distilleries. They have millions and millions of dollars for their marketing campaigns. They don't need you to help talk about their limited releases. Them son of a bitches are going to sell out no matter what, right? Does Ingram Distillery exist in 5 years? You and I can help that. If we think it is a valuable distillery, we should be talking about it as much as we possibly can. There's the space for tasting analysis, flavor profile discussions on distilleries. I'll leave that to other people because I think it's less interesting and there are people that are far better at it than I am. Historical education around the distilleries that are there, whether it be the legacy distilleries or the craft distilleries. Here's 10 distilleries you've never heard of that blew my mind at the festival. Somebody make that, right? That's an interesting video, I think, but maybe it doesn't tweak the algorithm in a way that makes you feel all tingly on the inside. I don't know. But the be-all end-all for me is that if you're making the exact same video that everyone else made about the festival, why were you even there, right? You're not adding anything other than an echo into a chamber. So I'm going to wrap here. Like I said, it was going to take me a while to get to this wrap. It is what it is. Reminder, if you attended the 2025 Kentucky Bourbon Festival, Potter Jane was showing their new make to people and communicating to you what might possibly be one of the most interesting brands in a handful of years whenever this grows to complete maturity. Craig Beam of the Beam family debuted his first ever bourbon out of a distillery in Western Kentucky. David Mandel of Whiskey House, which is one of the most technologically advanced distilleries in the state right now, spent some time educating you on what contract distilling's growing importance is in the industry, and also showed you some really fantastic finished red wine whiskey. There were 65 different distilleries pouring at least one expression each, many of them pouring multiples. If you missed all of that because you were standing in line, that's your fault, not the festival's fault. If you focused on having bottles that you could then make another video about later on, you missed 15 different episodes you could have generated from the contacts that you had while you were there. This is my admonition to any of the social media people. To the consumers, right? This is yet another ranting video. Don't give it the attention. Go find somebody who gave you the 5 craft distilleries that you need to know about from Kentucky Bourbon Festival 2025, or find the conversation that is about master distillers, what they learned about on a specific technique, or a blind tasting challenge from these different craft distilleries, or the buff turkey conversation, or contract distilling deep dive with Whiskey House, or, any number of things. Tell culture at the Kentucky Bourbon Festival. There's all these really, really interesting stories that could have been told that we're not telling now. I'm not telling it either, right? I'm trying to leave space for other content creators to do their jobs as well, but it feels like most of them aren't interested, right? They want to make the thing that's going to feed the algorithm. The algorithm is then going to continue their popularity. And if your goal is to maintain your popularity, well done, move along. For the festival, we have to address the identity crisis that some attendees feel like there is. And I want to really kind of keep this in mind, is that it's still a small percentage of attendees, because most of the attendees were milling around, having a drink, talking to people. There was a lot of people that had a really, really good time. They just don't happen to be the people that also live in the social media spaces. The people that are in your YouTube comments are often the people that are going to think the same thing as you. The people that are in your Instagram comments are already your fans, but they're not the attendees, right? There is a good majority of the people that attend Kentucky Bourbon Festival that don't know who these social media influencers are, and that's okay, because they're there just to have a good time and enjoy themselves. And that's what the event really should be about, is exploring new flavors, new profiles, new distilleries, having fun with friends, and not having your phone out all the time, right? Now, as a creator, as a media person, that's the stuff we have to do. But it is still for the average consumer, for the person who watches this video who doesn't know who I am, because it is now 2026 and they're on the fence about whether they're going to buy a ticket or not. Let me leave you with this one excerpt. The festival holds incredible value if your goal is to taste something you've never seen before. If your goal is to have a deep conversation with somebody within the industry, if your goal is to meet people that like bourbon that you've never met before, if your goal is to avoid people that you've never met before, but be able to kind of mill around and be in the general vicinity of people that think the same thing as you, if you want to see diverse populations within whiskey, and I'll say this, I want to illustrate that, because what I saw 2 years ago was a lack of diversity. It was a whole bunch of me-looking dudes milling around, sniffing glasses. Last year, that diversity started to grow. And this year, it was incredibly apparent that it's not just a bunch of me-looking dudes smelling whiskey. It's a bunch of different people. If your goal is to do those things, you're going to have a good time, right? If you put together a group of 4 or 5 people and you go stay at an Airbnb and you have meals afterwards and you eat breakfast in the morning and you just kind of hang out and watch TV or whatever the hell it is you do, or throw a frisbee in the backyard, you're going to have a good time. If you go to buy bottles, you might have a bad time. If your goal is to get 25 bottles, the biggest table full, and that's what I need to make, is a thumbnail full of bottles that I picked up at the event. I have 3 bottles that I got from the event. 1 I purchased, and 2 were a part of a media event that I attended off-site. That's it. But I had a phenomenal time, and I would have paid to have been there had my media credentials expired. To the people that put on the event, thank you so much for the access to the media. I think it's incredibly important to be able to push this communication out there. Maybe we need to tighten the ranks a little bit and start eliminating some chaff of people that are, trying to exploit the event for something it wasn't intended to be. So like I said, maybe your answer is, what's the identity of the Kentucky Bourbon Festival? Is it a bottle event where you just happen to get to taste whiskey, or is it a tasting event where you just happen to be able to buy bottles, right? Let's make sure that communication is appropriate. So when someone buys a ticket next year, they understand what they're getting into. And I think that content is out there. I think it's probably just lazy consumers that are paying attention to 1 or 2 or 3 YouTube videos that they watched where they, complained about it. But maybe the other answer is this pulls some people's interest out of attending, and it opens it up for the folks that want to be there for the right reasons, because you're going to sell out. We know you're going to sell out all of the tickets that you have available because it is an incredibly popular event with unprecedented access. So all that to say, thank you guys for watching this video, right? It is a lot of me complaining about what other people are doing with their social media content and what they did with their media access. And maybe some of these folks came on their own dime and gave the report as a result of the money that they spent themselves. Perfectly fine as well. Let's be honest about the entire story, though, right? If you go look at the marketing material about what Kentucky Bourbon Festival is, did it achieve those things? If you made a checklist and you said it did this, it did this, it did this, what's the thing that missed out for you? Is it 1 out of 15 items? That's a successful event, right? So thanks for tuning into this episode of the Embellish Pod. If you enjoyed this, please leave me a review on whatever platform you're consuming this on. Leave a comment if at all possible. Hit me up on social media on TikTok or Instagram at Embellish Pod. You can give me a follow so you can keep up with what's going on here. I can also be found at www.embellishpod.com with all of my links, accounts, contact details, and more. Thanks for stopping by.